The iPhone 16 Pro Max is the latest evolutionary step forward for the iPhone. There are a number of smaller changes inside and out, along with a pretty big change with the addition of camera control. And after 4 weeks of using the iPhone 16 Pro Max, this feels like peak iPhone, and that kind of makes me sad. So I want to go over the things that are new and changed this year and give you my opinion on the size, the battery, camera features, camera control, and Apple Intelligence, along with a couple of issues I've seen along the way. All right, let's just go ahead and start off with the design and then the display. And on the outside, there are just a couple of minor changes, but it mostly follows the design of the iPhone 15 Pro. The titanium band on the 16 Pro is now just a slightly matter finish or a flatter finish compared to the brushed finish on the 15 Pro. The 16 Pro is just slightly taller and wider with a larger 6.9-inch display compared to 6.7 and an ever so slightly smaller bezel. And besides the ever slightly larger display, this is basically the same as last year. It gets up to 2000 nits of brightness outside, up to 1600 nits with HDR, and 1000 nits in regular brightness when needed. But the exception is the 60 Pro and Pro Max can also get down to just 1 nit. This can be helpful when you're in nearly pitch black settings. It can be easier on the eyes to open up your phone and scroll and not bother the person next to you. But sometimes when I use it, it feels like it's actually too dim. Funny enough, one thing that actually didn't change on the outside for the first time in a long time is the size of the camera, bezels, and bump on the back. And yes, I measured them with a caliper just to be sure, because, I'm a nerd. On the right-hand side of the 16 Pro Max, there is the new camera control, which replaces the wideband 5G antenna, and I'll talk more about that in just a minute. The physical design of this iPhone is so close to the 15 line that a couple of years ago, it would have been called the iPhone 15s Pro Max. The only difference is the slightly larger body and screen. And when holding them side by side, you can feel the size and weight difference a little bit. But if you just walk away and just use the 16, it basically feels pretty much the same as the 15 Pro Max, or heck, even the 14 Pro Max or the 13 Pro Max. There's a difference, but not noticeable in day-to-day usage. It's just as large and kind of annoying to use as the previous Max-sized iPhones. Now, the battery life on the 16 Pro Max has been pretty incredible. Apple says it's the longest lasting iPhone, and that seems about right in my experience. So let me just show you my actual usage of my iPhone. So if I go into settings and into battery and give it a second to load, we can see I use the iPhone quite a lot, but especially if we switch to the 10-day view, if you zoom in on these, like this amount of time that I'm spending on the iPhone is really unhealthy. If I go back to Monday, my screen on time was 9 hours and 23 minutes and my idle time was 10 hours. And I used basically the entire amount of battery. So basically 100% of battery or really, really close. But for the most part, even when I'm getting, say, 3 hours of screen time or 5.5 hours of screen time plus a bunch of idle time, because I watch a lot of streaming video and a lot of streaming live audio during the day, I'm still going to bed every night with about 25% or higher battery left over. And that's pretty incredible with the amount of unhealthy usage that I'm actually getting. And you can see really, it's just kind of streaming video, doing some networking work, email apps, threads, Maps, YouTube, the usual stuff. But I use the iPhone all the time. It's pretty crazy. And as far as my charging habits, I just charge it every night when I go to bed. I have my battery set to 100% because I obviously need it. My 15 Pro Max from last year, after a year, charging it to 100% is 90% maximum capacity, 267 cycles. So not too bad overall. And honestly, I wish that Apple didn't even add this view to see the maximum capacity of the battery because it just makes people anxious and nervous. And then they get upset about an actual wearable part of the iPhone. But for the most part, I don't even pay attention to that. I just use my iPhone every day. And the most important thing is, can I get through a full day? And I can, even with this heavy, heavy usage. But when it comes to charging, the 16 Pro and Pro Max can now do up to 25 watts of wireless MagSafe charging and up to 30 watts of wired charging through USB. And it also supports the newest G2 standard wireless charging, and you can get some really great chargers for your new iPhone with the help of today's sponsor, Ugreen. The Ugreen Uno Charger 100 watt and the Ugreen Uno Wireless Charger 15 watt can get you powered up fast with a style you won't find anywhere else. And they're all part of Ugreen's new fast and fun charging accessories for the new iPhone that includes chargers, cables, power banks, and hubs. These chargers feature a built-in TFT smart display that breathes new life into your charging process by adding cool robot status emojis to help you show charging status. Like this cute guy just hanging out when you're not charging anything. This is what you'll see when charging a device, and when charging is complete, you get sunglasses to let you know you're ready to roll. This Uno Charger 100 watt is super powerful with 1 USB-A and 3 USB-C ports and is compatible with phones, tablets, MacBooks, PC, laptops, and more. You can fast charge multiple devices at the same time, including an iPhone 16 Pro, from 0 to 54% in just 30 minutes with the 100-watt max output port. The Ugreen Uno wireless charger 15-watt is Qi 2 certified, providing up to 15 watts of wireless charging, has a second charging pad for your AirPods, and can even charge a third device at the same time. So if you want to check out the adorable Ugreen Uno charger 100-watt or the Ugreen wireless charger 15-watt for your new iPhone, you can save by using the links in the description below. And my thanks to Ugreen for sponsoring this video. One kind of side note I want to mention here is that the speakers on the 16 Pro Max are actually a little bit quieter than what you'll find on the 15 Pro Max, and actually much quieter than you're going to find on the 14 Pro Max. I don't know that they sound better or different from the 15 Pro Max, but they are slightly quieter, meaning I have to turn up the volume higher, and in some cases, like when I'm in the shower, the volume is sometimes not as high as I would like it to be. Here's an example comparing the iPhone 16 Pro Max to the iPhone 14 Pro Max. And as you can see, the iPhone 14 Pro Max is a few dB higher, which is actually quite a bit louder than you would expect. All right, now I want to talk about Wi-Fi and some of the issues that I've had. Apple updated the iPhone 16 line to Wi-Fi 7. Technically, but there are some caveats that almost no one will ever care about. But there is that one person in their ICU that's going to give me crap in the comments if I don't mention it. Yes, it has Wi-Fi 7, so you can connect it to a Wi-Fi 7 access point if you went out and spent hundreds of dollars for a new router or mesh system. I have mine connected to a Wi-Fi 7 router right now. What Apple kinda hides is that Apple's only using 160 megahertz bandwidth instead of the full 320 megahertz bandwidth of Wi-Fi 7. That means you can't get the maximum speed, the maximum theoretical speed of Wi-Fi 7. First of all, as you can see, I'm not even getting great speed on 160 megahertz right now, even though my Wi-Fi 7 access point is just right over there. Wi-Fi signals are all affected by so many variables. How far are you from the access point? What's between the iPhone and the AP, like a big bag of water? How many devices? How much interference? All those things will drastically affect your speed. Second of all, if you're complaining about not getting multi-gigabit wireless speed at home, I have to ask, why does it matter? Even if you have gigabit internet at home or at work, that doesn't mean you pull everything from the internet at 1 gigabit per second. When you're visiting websites, you're visiting at a few megabits per second, or streaming video at maybe 50 megabits per second. Even the largest file services out there will only get you a few hundred megabits per second. You will never benefit from multi-gigabit iPhone 16 Wi-Fi. The only exception is if you're transferring very large files between your iPhone and your computer or your NAS on a really fast network. That's about it. So if that's you for some reason, okay, complain about the iPhone 16 Wi-Fi 7 below. But everyone else is getting way more Wi-Fi 7 than they need. But I have actually had a problem with the Wi-Fi performance on my 16 Pro Max, where it seems to drop connections for a while when walking around my house and connecting to different access points. Streaming radio and video is dropping out on my 16 Pro Max as I walk around, and I can see the Wi-Fi symbol at the top disappears, goes to 5G, and stays there for quite a long time before maybe finally eventually getting back on Wi-Fi. This is not something that happens on the 15 Pro Max or even my 14 Pro Max or any other devices in this house. And I've spent hours troubleshooting my Ubiquiti network and found some threads where others are having the same issue, which is not fixed in iOS 18.1. On a whim this morning, I went to Settings and General and scrolled down to Transfer Reset, and I did a reset of all network settings. And so far, it seems like it's been better. I'm not sure that it's fixed, but it seems to have been better. So I'm curious if you're out there, have you had this issue with your iPhone 16? And if so, does reset network settings actually help? And the last thing I want to talk about before the camera control and camera features is the A18 Pro. And I wish I could say I feel a difference in day-to-day usage of anything I do. Anything, but I don't. Apple says that the A18 Pro is like 15% faster than the A17 Pro in the iPhone 15 Pro and has up to twice the performance for ray tracing for games. But listen, Apple's iPhone chips have been so fast for so long that you're barely going to see any difference in performance if upgrading from the 14 line or the 15 line or even the 13 line. But I do like knowing that I have the fastest iPhone to run my work email or the Threads app or messages or the few games that I actually play. But the performance boost really adds nothing to my day-to-day activities. Ah yes, and now the biggest new Pro features this year all have to do with the camera. And the camera is one of the biggest reasons that I upgrade every year. I want to get the best shots out of my iPhone without thinking about it when I whip it out of my pants in public. Well, I'm not one who sits there trying to adjust the exposure and the shadows and the angle for the best artistic shot on the fly. I just want to get a quick shot of my family or friends or something interesting and move on. But if you love to tinker with all the little details, this 16 Pro Max lets you do a bit more than you could previously. And in the past, Pro on iPhone cameras mostly meant better sensors or more lenses. But recently, Pro means adding Pro camera features into the iPhone, like Pro RAW and cropped sensor focal lengths and photos, or cinematic mode and action mode and ProRes and log for video. And there are a bunch of new camera updates this year, like 4K 120 slow motion video, spatial photos to view on the Apple Vision Pro, an updated 48 megapixel wide angle lens, new photographic styles, and of course, the camera control. With the photographic styles, I fully understand why some people think it's a big deal and they want to play with them. But because I'm more of a point and shoot type of person, I configured a default in the camera settings and basically based it off of what other real professionals have suggested. So I set it to, let's see, gold for now. And then I moved this little slider thing down here and supposedly add some shadows and whatever else. I mean, it's not something that I want to play with every day. But what I did do is set this as a default, so every time I take a photo, it's just going to have this effect and be there, and I don't have to do anything, and hopefully it gives me better photos. And if it doesn't, I can actually go in and change it later, which is pretty cool. The 120 frames per second slow motion is actually pretty good, and I've used it for some product B-roll type shots. I do actually find that it's useful, and I will probably use it now and then going forward. With the bigger 48 megapixel ultra-wide lens, I have a hard time really seeing any difference compared to the previous 12 megapixel lenses. Even when zooming in, I'm not seeing much of a difference at all. The 5x telephoto is great. It's the same tetraprism lens that was on the 15 Pro Max last year, but it's also on the regular Pro this year. Now, I'm sure I don't have to go through the details and explain camera control to you. You know what it is and how it works by now. But I do want to say that in the last month, I have almost never organically picked up my phone and pressed the camera control to open up the camera and take a photo. There are so many other ways to open up the camera on the iPhone, and muscle memory has just kind of won out. So if I were to change my lock screen button to something else useful, then maybe it would force me to use the camera control more often, but I haven't found anything else that I really want to put on the lock screen. And now as far as actually using the camera control button, I'll just say it. I'm not a fan. First of all, just using this button as a shutter requires more force than you think it should, which means that I actually tilt the camera a little bit one way or another when I press it all the way down to take a photo. In good light, this hasn't been an issue. I haven't seen any blurry photos from it, but it does slightly change how you frame your photo. For the half press taptic function, the favorite word on the net is finicky, and it is. Trying to figure out the force needed for a half press just feels alien, and especially when you need to double press to change options. And the motion for swiping back and forth feels inconsistent, like transitioning between too slow and too fast or too sensitive. It's just an odd type feeling. It's really hard to explain unless you just try it out. Plus, it's in a slightly awkward position, a little bit too far in from the edge, which makes it a little uncomfortable to try and use. You have to kind of move your hand around and block part of the screen. But because the camera UI still takes up much of the space, my hand doesn't really cover anything for the photo. But that is the thing. The on-screen UI is actually so much easier to use. It's easier to adjust the settings for the zoom and get to everything else that you need to, and to be able to take a photo without actually moving the phone around and messing up your photo. The camera button just feels like Apple added a hardware feature for the appearance of adding something new to the hardware. So in my experience in the last month, the camera control really adds no advantage to the iPhone's ability to take photos or adjust settings, and honestly, I may have accidentally hit the camera control button picking it up off of a table more than I have when I picked it up to actually intend to use it. Now, I'm not trying to, and I don't want to belittle Apple for trying new things with the iPhone. I'm glad they are. I just don't think that this one hit the mark. Apple Intelligence is coming in waves over the next year, and one of those features includes using camera control to open up visual intelligence to help you identify things, I guess. And maybe that will make the button more appealing to me or more useful, but as it is now, it's not something that I use. And speaking of Apple Intelligence, by the time you see this video, the first parts of it will probably be available with writing tools, message and notification summarization, the cleanup feature to remove things from photos, and some other things. I've used the betas over the last few weeks, and it still feels like a beta even though it's being released to the public next week. But I am bullish on the future of Apple Intelligence and the new Siri, so time will tell how well that goes. So that's the iPhone 16 Pro Max, and for years, Pro seemed to just mean faster, better, prettier, but as Apple actually moves towards more features that specifically target pro photographers and videographers, I'm finding that these features don't really necessarily cater to me. And if we're at the point where Apple is just adding new buttons for the sake of trying something new, then maybe we're just at peak iPhone hardware where we shouldn't really expect much beyond spec bumps each year. And that's okay, but I really do miss the days where every release of the iPhone every year was more exciting. Now, though, we get to look forward to a new generation of software advances with AI, so maybe that will ramp the excitement back up. But anyway, what do you guys think about the new iPhone 16 Pro and Pro Max? Are you upgrading this year? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you want to see my full comparison of the 16 Pro Max versus the 14 Pro Max, check out this video right over here. It's a good one. Hit the thumbs up button if you liked it, hit subscribe if you want, and I'll see you next time.